All right, everybody, welcome back. I know it's been quite some time since I last put out a video, about a week and a half, roughly. And thank you guys for waiting patiently for this. I've been kind of having a crazy schedule. So, what's the topic for today? Well, in my community section, I put out that I was going to get to this video. I think this is an important one. This is one that's been requested from one of my subscribers. And so, let's get into it. What I'm talking about today is the difference between carbs, fats, protein, and water, and some sodium, and a few other things, right? This is just going to be like a general overview. You can kind of manipulate it as you need to. So, when we're looking at being in a deficit or a surplus, right? Calories is always, always, always ultimately going to be the king. So, what does this mean? If you want to gain weight, you have to have more calories than what you're burning. If you want to lose weight, you have to have less calories than what you're burning, right? In a day-to-day, technically it's going to be roughly a week time frame, right? Because day-to-day you're going to be a little bit off based off of what you're doing that day, how much your activity is that day at work, and so you're going to look within a week. A week is usually what you base it off of. So we're going to look in the short term, day in, day out. Trying to do one of those if you're trying to bulk or if you're trying to be in a deficit. All right, we've established that. That has to be a priority, right? Regardless of whatever it is you're trying to do. Then, secondly, you have to maintain protein regardless, right? So we've already went over this before. 1 gram roughly per pound of body weight, ideal body weight, right? So if you're 180 and you're trying to get to 200, 200 grams of protein. If you're 200 and you want to get to 180, it's going to be 180 grams of protein. And that's going to be tied to your surplus or deficit, right? Now, most people stop there and then they kind of just backfill whatever it is after, right? For the most part, that's not going to be too big of a deal, especially if you're at a higher body fat. It's a little bit less noticeable day in, day out. But as you get leaner, you're going to get to the point where when you start to carb load, we're talking about more of a deficit here. So if you're in a low deficit and you have carbs low and your fats are high, and you've maintained your ideal body weight gram of protein, then you backfilled everything else with carbs, but your carbs is very low and your fats are very high. What does this mean? Well, carbs tend to have a swelling effect in the muscle, right? They turn into glycogen, and then that gets stored in the muscle, and then with water, that causes swelling. So that's why when you see guys say, "I'm carved up, I have a carb day, I'm feeling big, I'm feeling like they're looking bigger, their muscles look fuller." It's usually because they have more carbs, which also has a tendency to require the retention of more water. It's not a bad thing. It's just what comes with the territory of having a high carb diet. Okay, so the opposite can be said for fats now. Fats, when you think about it, just like when you pour olive oil in a cup of water, they separate. Fats and water don't get along too well. But this can be to your advantage, especially when you get lower in body fat. So when you're at a lower body fat and you want to, let's say, kind of like do like a mini peak, right? If you have like something coming up, you have a beach day, like a vacation, and you're not exactly where you want to be, but you want to look your best, or you are at the point where you want to look your absolute best, you can do this as well. So you would gradually bring your carbs down, or you could tank it, but I really don't suggest. I'm not very big into doing drastic things unless it's for competitive reasons, right? Like you really have to get to like a certain point and you have to do those things. So you bring your carbs down, your fats come up, protein stays right where it's supposed to be, calories are staying right where they're supposed to be. That's controlled. What happens is the water retention, because there's less glycogen in the muscle, for that duration in between of being fully carved and being carb depleted, you're going to look what we call flat, right? So you might not look as vascular as what you would be if you were fully depleted, but in the same sense, you're not going to look as full as if you were carb loaded. This is kind of also the issue people have whenever it comes to losing weight. When they get to that flat look, because usually they drop their carbs, they automatically want to reel back because they say, "Oh, I'm looking worse than what I did whenever I was eating like the way I was before." You got to understand there's a transition period where you can't always look your best, right? We're just trying to get from here to here to get the desired result that we want. You can see this with some of my videos, especially my posing videos, where because I post so often, you'll see when I'm transitioning, I know why my body may look flat. Why, especially my legs. I'll notice it in my legs the most. Like if I'm really carb loaded, my legs will look really big, really full. And when I'm dieting and I get past that transition point where my carbs come down and the fats are high and the glycogen leaves the body, it's really depleted. I can start to see more vascularity. I can see veins in the legs. I can see some more separation, especially in the hamstring. And so we can use this to our advantage. Now, if you wanted to do like a mix of this, right? If you wanted to mix it up, what you could do is you could come down on your carbs, glycogen comes down, swelling decreases, but you have a more grainier, harder look, right? The skin looks like it's sitting on top of the muscle. It doesn't look as poofy, right? So as it comes down, it starts to, get that dryness to it. But now you're not looking as full. So what you can do is you can do it like a day or two before if you plan it right, where you're coming in real nice and you hit that point, and now you're looking super dry, but you look a little bit less full than what you want. And then like let's say you're going to go to the like doing a photo shoot or something, or you're going to I don't know if competing would be you can do it with competing, but it'd have to be all based off of your body at the time. It's kind of very day like hour to hour at that point. Let's say you're going to the beach tomorrow, for example, and you wanted to show off your best physique, for example, then that day, and when you woke up, you would just carb load as much as you could, stay within your calories, and still make sure you hit your protein goal. And what's going to happen is it's going to fill your muscles with glycogen and water, and then you're still going to have, but you're still going to be lean and dry enough where the veins are still going to be showing. So now you have a mix of that dry hardness with the fullness that comes with carbs. And you can do like what a mini peak, you could call it. And so where does sodium come into this? Well, if you're not watching your sodium, you don't really need to for the most part, as long as you're consuming sodium and it's not affecting your health. If you have issues with sodium, when you're consuming sodium, it actually helps with hydration. A lot of people think it's the opposite. If you look at Gatorade, sports drinks, pre-workouts, you look at any of these, they always, for the most part, have a good amount of sodium in it. And that's because sodium actually helps with water retention in the muscle. And so, in a sense, everything in extreme amounts is not going to be good for you. But having sodium in your daily intake is actually going to help you stay hydrated. If you look at like the IV, I think they're called IV sticks that you pour in your water in those little packets, stuff like that. Liquid IVs, I think is what it's called. Anything that's got like electrolytes in it, like sodium is an electrolyte. I don't know how many people know that or not, but sodium is an electrolyte. So it's going to help you hydrate. Just don't overdo it, right? It's also going to help with cramping and prevent cramping. That's the same thing with like most pre-workouts and most of these energy drinks, and not energy drinks, some of them, but sports drinks. You're going to have magnesium and potassium. Potassium and magnesium help with muscle contraction, but those are also electrolytes. But we're going to be mainly focused on what I just talked about earlier. So when you're just backfilling off of protein and calories, and you're wondering why you sometimes look really good, and then sometimes you may look flat within a short period, like a week or two, it may be because you're hitting the carbs or the fats ratio just right, where you get that fullness with that dryness. And so that's why tracking that is very important as well, and play around with it. If you're in a deficit and you're hitting your protein goal, say, I want to see what my body does if I drop my fats, maintaining a healthy level, and I bring the carbs up as high as possible. So I have a high carb deficit, right? In that sense, I mean, it's not going to be big as if you're in a surplus, but how does your body respond? And then if you're in a deficit and you want to see how does your body respond if you have a high fat and a low carb? So you start bringing your carbs down either aggressively or slowly, and you just evaluate your physique after a week or two, because it's not going to just flush it all out immediately, right? It's going to take a few days at least. So usually about a week is what you plan for, and then you can start to see how your body can fluctuate maintaining water and glycogen. And at this point, now you can really dial in more and more, and that will help you kind of get that look that you want, or at least peak in a way that you would like to. And if anything, at least you get to experiment and see, if your goal is performance, maybe you function better on a high carb diet. Maybe you function better on a high fat diet. The protein needs to stay the same, and the calories always have to be king, right? But for example, for me, for performance in the gym when I'm lifting and I want to be able to lift the heaviest I want, carbohydrates for me is where it's at. Like I need carbs. Like usually if I'm bulking, I'm consuming like 300 or more carbs easy. And when I'm cutting, I try to keep my carbs, roughly half of that. So like 150 would be considered like a still kind of high carb in a deficit. But I usually sit around like 100 if I can, keep the fats a little higher. Mainly because I'm consuming more protein, which comes with more fats. And if I can have a more well-rounded choice of meat, then I'll take it. Keeping in mind, I don't try to consume a ton of fat, and I try to get, healthy choices if I can. So typically it's going to be from, good meat choices. So red meats, salmon, 100% real butter. I don't do it all the time. Stuff like that. I don't really do nuts because nuts are just so high in calories for the amount of fat to protein that I don't think it's worth it for the most part, unless I was trying to gain weight. In a deficit, you look at a handful of nuts and it's not very much compared to what you get. And it's going to be very hard to maintain that, because if you're trying to do like a decent protein intake, 220 grams of protein a day, it's kind of hard to backfill that whenever you're eating like really dense fat containing nuts, peanuts, cashews, stuff like that. And so for me, I just stay away from it when I'm in a deficit, and then I add those in whenever I'm in a surplus. And then with carbs, maybe I'll swap out oatmeal and rice more often whenever I'm doing a deficit, or if I'm doing a bulk, right? If I'm trying to consume and get into a surplus, rice tends to be easier. You go through it quicker, it hits the bloodstream faster. And so just understanding food choices. Like if I wanted to, on a deficit, still try to get like max strength performance with what I can, right, for a good amount of reps, because I'm not trying to one rep max in a deficit. That's just not a very good idea in my opinion. But let's say we were trying to, get like a really hard, heavy set. If you have like a light leg day in the week and then you have a heavy leg day in the week because you're hitting legs twice, on that heavy leg day, maybe I don't eat oatmeal. Maybe I'll try to consume more rice, and I won't do it in the morning. I would do it, depending on when you work out. If it's in the morning and the afternoon, if you're working in the afternoon, then you would time it more about an hour-ish away from your workout, and then you put all your carbs in that you can. And then you're getting pretty much a mini carb load at that time to use in the gym, because then carbs is what fuels your workouts. Protein is only what rebuilds the muscle after. So the protein is only there to make sure that we're getting full recovery and full rebuild, right? But the carbohydrates is actually what you're really using in the short term for your workouts. Yes, fat does get used as well, but we know that glycogen turns into ATP, and that's what causes the firing and the muscle contraction stuff, right? And that's why towards the end of your workout, you're like, man, I don't feel like I can't get a good contraction, right? It's usually because you're depleted. You've exhausted your muscle and flushed everything out for that time period. So I kind of hope this is something that would help. And as I'm talking through it, I'll be throwing things up here, and you'll see that, as we go through. I really appreciate y'all being patient with me on not being able to get a video out within the past week and a half. It's just been very hard with my schedule. I've been kind of all over the place with my schedule right now. And so this is my first chance to sit down, make a dedicated video for y'all. And if you have not really been paying attention to this stuff, at least be more cognizant of what it is that you're doing, because you control all those factors, right? You get to see how your body responds because you're an individual. And so regardless of what somebody else may say, like, oh, you need to have a high carb diet, that may not be the solution for how you feel, how you process it. And same thing with high fat. Some people are going to tell you that carnivore is the best thing since, sliced bread. But when you try it, you feel terrible. Same thing with, very low meats and you do a very high veggie diet and you're doing more soybean protein, stuff like that. Maybe your body doesn't respond to it well. So you kind of have to, there's all these factors that you have at your disposal. Don't just focus on only calories and protein, because you may be missing out on other things that could help you get past that little bit. You know what I mean? This is what it's about. It's not, everybody does the majority right, but we're trying to get the extra top 1%, right? The everything we can get out of it. And so if you have a way to do it, utilize it. Utilize it. Same thing with everything else. Caffeine, sodium, magnesium, carbs, fats, proteins, meal timing, carb timing, manipulation of your macros. Start thinking about your micronutrients too. Are you getting all your vitamins? And are you getting the necessary minerals? That kind of stuff. Optimize your nutrition, because your nutrition will lead into your performance in the gym. So that's all I got for now. This is Chad Endless Potential. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.